Hi, everyone. Ernest Peralta here, and I want to welcome you to this episode of the Breakthrough Investor in Commercial Real Estate. Today, our guest is Brent Sprenkle. Thanks for being on the show, Brent.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Well, glad that you're here. Well, a little bit about Brent, just a little background about him. He's got 2 decades of commercial real estate experience, specializing in the greater Los Angeles multifamily market. And Brent has sold over $1 billion worth of multifamily properties since the start of his career with 2 of the nation's top firms. Brent has also purchased and repositioned over 20 properties, either on his own or with partners, from apartment buildings, office, industrial, and retail. He currently lives in Manhattan Beach, California, with his wife and 4 children. And he's also written a book called How to Create a Real Estate Empire, $1 Billion Portfolio. Brent, again, welcome.
Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Well, again, I'm grateful to have you on the show so that, I get to know you a little bit better for myself, but as well as our listeners as well. So let's dive into some of your expertise. If you can kind of take us back a little bit to understand your backstory, and what did you do before you got into real estate?
Oh, great question. So I started out as an engineer out of college. I wound up with an engineering job building, oddly enough, DirecTV satellites for Hughes Space and Communications. They were an LA company, and they brought me from Pennsylvania out here to Los Angeles right out of college. And I did that for 3 years, and it turns out I was not a very good engineer and basically worked my way out of a job. A friend of mine had bought, this is the late 90s. A friend of mine had bought a couple of foreclosed apartment buildings and was doing really well. He inherited a little bit of money and very wisely, with the funds that he had, deployed them and bought some, like I mentioned, I think 3 distressed deals, and just was doing incredibly well, and turned them over to property management and was just sitting back and living a very good life at a very early age. And I thought, this looks pretty interesting. So after I lost my engineering job, obviously I didn't have any funds to go buy real estate at that point. I was flat broke. But he advised me that the best way to get into the business and to get yourself up to that level is to become a real estate broker and sell apartment buildings. So I looked in the LA Times, and there was one ad for apartment building brokers, and it said, I interviewed for the job, and they said, "You have a car?" I said, "Yes." "Like, do you have a computer?" I said, "Yes." So, like, "Are you willing to work for free?" I was like, I guess. And they're like, "You're hired." So just like that, Ernest got a job doing brokerage, and that's the end of that story. So it's been the same deal the last 20 some years.
Wow, that's great. Kind of an easy transition, right? If you will.
Well, it was very, very awkward. It was going from yes and no's, ones and twos, to trying to deal with all the intricacies of dealing with, human beings and sales and, really business prospecting. That was something that they didn't teach in engineering school, right? It was a whole different skill set, and took me a while to really develop it. And I'm still trying to work on it, but it's something that you don't get overnight. So it's been something that I've been working on for the last 20 some years.
Yeah, that's interesting. And, coming from an engineering background to, commercial real estate, like you said, there's some nuances just in terms of personality and maybe some other, skill sets that you're still trying to develop. Well, what is one thing that you wish you had known when you transitioned from, your engineering position into commercial real estate?
So this was like 99, and in 99 all these people were getting these tech jobs, and these IPOs were coming out, and everyone had this kind of get rich quick mentality off of the internet and technology companies. And I thought I was going to get into real estate and make a ton of money and go buy a bunch of deals and be retired in 8 years. What I didn't know was, Ernest, it's a long game. It just takes a long time. You got to build your business up, and then you will save a little bit of money, and then maybe you can buy one property, but maybe you need to buy a house first. And then I just didn't really realize the capital that was going to be required and how long it was going to take to get there. So I don't know if it's one thing I wish I would have known, because I knew it was going to take a while. But you have to be very patient and just realize it's not going to happen overnight. That's the big takeaway I tell everyone who wants to get in this business. You're not going to get very wealthy quickly. Real estate is a long game. No matter what you're doing, brokerage, investing, it's just a very, very long game. You have to have a long investment horizon for anything you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you currently investing in commercial real estate?
Yeah, that's been my primary investment business. We're actually in escrow buying 3 apartment buildings right now, 2 in the Hollywood area and 1 in San Diego. So yes, it's still my number one business plan is to keep acquiring buildings slowly, and just like I put in the subject title of the book, the $1 billion portfolio, is it doesn't happen overnight. You just have to keep buying, you keep accumulating, sell a few properties and exchange them if you have a reason to, but you have to keep growing your business. And it's one deal at a time.
Yeah, it's definitely a long-term play. A lot of folks try to get in thinking that they could either come in and do a flip and turn it around. Although that happens in some instances, but over the long term, real estate is definitely a long-term play. Yeah. At what point in your career would you say was your turning point when you became a breakthrough investor?
I love you saying that, but I just think I'm sort of a very cautious conservative investor is really how I view myself. But there was a moment around 2012, a client of mine called me and he wanted to buy an apartment building. I'd done a lot of business with him in the past. And we found 3 deals that seemed to fit his criteria. We wrote offers on all 3 of them. And they were all available. They were all sitting there on the internet, and the brokers and sellers were just thrilled to get an offer. We're coming out of the recession. And we wrote offers and we got counters back. And then, we responded to the counters with a, buyer counter. And, my client, the buyer, decided to jump on one of the deals. He liked this one property. It was like a 30-unit building in the Koreatown area of Los Angeles. And he jumped on it. The other property, we just never responded. We just dropped him because he only wanted to buy one building. Well, I later got a call from one of those, and during the process, I helped the buyer with loan quotes, and he had me kind of model up what the down payment would be and what the cash flow would be. And I was like, these deals are pretty juicy. So my client's buying one, and eventually a broker called me back on the other deal and just said, hey, is your guy going to buy it? I was like, no. He's like, my seller really wants to get rid of this property. And I think I knew the guy pretty well, and we just kind of started just chatting, and he's like, maybe you should buy the deal. And I was like, maybe I should. The money's sitting in the bank doing nothing. Let's do it. Sure. And just like that, I'm in escrow on this apartment building. I hadn't bought anything in 5 years. I mean, we're coming out of the recession. Everyone was gun shy. Yep. And here I am buying it was like a 13-unit building in the Hollywood area. And that was kind of when I realized hey, these deals they're pretty easy and it's kind of fun. And the down payments weren't huge at the time. And there was really hardly any other competition from buyers. So it just made me think maybe it's time to start investing again. These deals make sense. And that's sort of the key phrase that I'll say over and over again. You buy buildings when they make sense. When the down payment is something that's reasonable, whether it's 25% or 35%, when you can get some cash flow out of the hole, when you think that the rents are going to grow, where the rents are not already at or above where the market levels are, when the area is okay, when the building you're comfortable with, good parking, good bones, that's when you buy a deal. You don't buy a deal just because you have money in the bank and you just feel like spending it. I mean, that's a recipe for a disaster. So that's kind of the answer your question about when it really started to make sense to me to buy. It was at that moment where I just realized that these deals work.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good story. And the way that you actually, got into the market at that time, I think it was just somewhat ideal, I guess. You can never time the market, but I guess, like you said, you can't just jump on deals just because, you want to. Considering the cap rates and the way things are now across the country, I know that things are pretty hot right now, not only, in Southern Cal, LA in general, but pretty much across the nation. If you could just kind of talk us through what are some strategies that, you use in terms of analyzing your properties. Do you mainly look at value add? Do you look at stabilization? And what kind of asset classes are you typically looking at?
We're typically buying I call them class B, but other people might call them class C apartment buildings. They're all value add, but there's a fine line between stabilized and value add. Sometimes these value add buildings are half empty. There's something wrong with them. Those are hard to finance. And the buildings are already stabilized. There's no upside left typically. And where are you going to, there's nothing you can do with it. You just buying it and just, it's like a bond. And that's not my business plan. So I'm trying to buy something that's well-maintained building, long-term owner, maybe there's a couple $100 here and there in the rents where you feel you can grow the rents eventually. But the cap rate in comparison with financing is got to be a nice gap in there so you can buy it and get a decent loan on it. So you're not coming out of pocket with, a 50% down payment. And, you immediately have some cash flow and there's some upside and there's some sort of a value added component so that you can increase the value of the property so you can either later sell it for a profit or refi some of your money out. So every deal is a different story. I have bought properties that had no upside, but they had a great cap rate. And I bought deals that had 100% upside and a low cap rate, but I had some way to finance it creatively to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, with your investments, do you typically, are you still doing, or do you do syndication, or are you kind of purchasing these properties outright, basically yourself, and then, bringing in passive investors?
I started out in my career just doing investing with other people. I'd make some commissions and I'd give it to someone else. They'd go put me into a partnership, an LLC. Those deals never really did well.
Okay.
It never did. Between all the fees and everything else, the deals never really did that great. So I've since then just been doing my own deals. Somebody told me once a long time ago that they'd rather buy a single or a double on their own than buy a home run with partners. And I just said, why? And they're like, because when you own a property with other people, you're at their mercy. When they want to sell it, when they want to refinance it, if there's a lawsuit on the property, if it needs a new roof, if the plumbing's bad, needs to be replaced, like all it takes is one other partner to say, no, I don't want to do it. And you're in a nightmare of a situation. I thought that was a good point. And it just made me think, if I can afford to buy a small building as opposed to a big building with partners, I'd rather buy the small building on my own. So that's just been my philosophy the whole time. Maybe someday that will change. At some point, I'm going to run out of cash to spend on buying buildings. And maybe at that point, I'll need some investors, but I'll deal with that down the road when I have to.
Yeah.
That's a quality problem that I'm hoping to have at some point.
At least you'll have options, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, how many units under, management do you currently have in your portfolio?
Well, I don't like to give out too many details because I get sometimes some clients get a little ornery if they find out that I have more buildings than them. But we've bought and sold over 10 buildings in the last 10 years here in LA. Some are very small and some are okay size. So it's been a range of deals and a range of business plans that we've had to execute on. But like I mentioned earlier, we're just trying to buy sort of bread and butter Class B and C apartment buildings around LA. And I've also bought buildings in San Diego. So we try to diversify a little bit, but they're all coastal Southern California.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. So you haven't really ventured out of Southern California.
Back in the day when I was buying with other people, we were doing deals in Utah and Texas and Colorado and Florida. And when the recession hit in 2008, those investments got crushed. Like literally a third of those got wiped out. So I just thought I'd rather buy, lower risk properties that maybe aren't quite as juicy on a cap rate yield basis. But, if I'm buying with a long-term plan, it's going to work itself out. It's over time, it's going to be great. I'm not buying the buildings because I need the cash flow to pay the bills today that I have. Mm-hmm. I'm buying all these buildings with the idea that in 5 to 10 years, I've repositioned all of them and they're cash flowing and I can either refinance and pull money out or sell them in exchange into something else. Because right now I have cash flow coming in from the brokerage business, which is paying a lot of the bills. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the long-term plan.
That's good. Yeah, that's great. If I may ask, what are some resources that have helped you along the way in commercial real estate?
I tell everybody that when you're buying apartment buildings, you really do need a lot of resources. I mean, the first is that you have to get educated on buying, and there's no single one resource on that. You just have to start small and work your way up, get to know the markets, get to know the business. But you need to get very, very comfortable relationships with a handful of brokers. You don't need to know 30 brokers, just like 3, 4, 5 brokers that do a lot of business in the space you want to be in. If you want to buy office buildings between 5 and 10 million bucks, I guarantee you there's probably 5 brokers that do almost all the office buildings in the market that you want to be in that price range. Same with retail, same with apartment buildings, same with whatever. There's always going to be 5 to 10 really good people that just dominate that space. You got to get to know them really well, because they're going to find you deals. They're going to be able to bounce stuff. You're going to be able to bounce stuff off them. Like if you're an escrow on something, you can call them and get their opinion on it. But really, the deal flow is the most important thing. Remember that REITs and other big giant companies, their biggest challenge is finding properties to buy. They've got the money, they've got all the other resources. The one thing they don't have is deal flow. You're going to be successful by becoming very friendly with just a handful of brokers that bring you deals to buy. So first, you got to understand what you're doing. Second, you got to find deals. Third, you got to be able to buy them and manage them. So you need to get very friendly with a couple management people that own management companies, et cetera. And not only do you need them to manage the properties once you own them, but they're going to help you buy them. They're going to help you inspect them. They're going to bring the vendors out. They're going to tell you if they think they can lease them, what they can rent the apartments for, or the office space, or the retail space, or whatever it might be. So it's really important to have those people on your side. And then lastly, the money. You need to, besides obviously having the money for the down payment, you need to have a few good banking relationships, whether it's through a mortgage broker or through a couple banks that you work with, so that when you find a deal, you can get that loan and be able to execute in a timely manner. If you have a 60-day escrow, you need to be able to make sure you can get it done. Buyers that don't have banking relationships, we're always worried about working with them as a broker, because they don't necessarily, we're not comfortable they're going to be able to get a loan. Mm-hmm. So it's really important that you have really those big 3 things. 1, you know how to get a loan. B, you've got the management team to help you manage it, but also inspect it. And lastly, the deal flow from knowing some brokers. Those are the big resource items that you really need to have.
Great advice, by the way. Yeah, I definitely think those are key. I just taking a mental note to make sure that, as we're doing our deals as well, to just make sure that, you don't overexpose yourself, and you really want to just try to focus in on those key relationships, like you said. And deal flow is definitely, the biggest part.
You got to be on the broker's radar, and then the brokers have to want to work with you. Remember, there's 1 million people out there to buy a really good deal. There's 1 million people. You want to be that one buyer that gets the phone call. And if you're not nice to these brokers, or you don't perform or whatever, they're not going to call you. They're going to call someone else, hopefully me, and offer that deal. So you've got to be a team player with the brokers, understand that they get paid only on commissions, and they will work with you because they want to close deals. So important.
Absolutely. No, great advice. Thank you. Appreciate that. So what trends do you foresee this year and into next year for multifamily real estate investing?
Well, we obviously have this eviction moratorium going on, and we obviously are getting through the COVID pandemic here. So the trend I see happening is more and more tenants getting jobs and starting to be able to pay their rent again. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping to see this eviction moratorium getting lifted, and tenants just starting to be able to pay their rent again, or being obligated to pay their rent again, and getting back to some level of normalcy. A lot of areas rents have dropped by 5 to 20%. So I'm hoping to see rent stabilize in a lot of these areas. But then again, there's some areas where the rents have gone up 10, 20% in the last 12 months, which is just mind blowing. But COVID has made certainly a shift in population in certain areas. So those areas of rents have gone gangbuster, where other areas like in Los Angeles, there's areas where rents are down 10, 20%. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I do think that the trend for the rest of this year, next year, is some stability in the rental market.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, COVID definitely threw a wrench into, everybody's kind of game, if you will, for those that are in real estate investing. And this moratorium now here in Seattle, we've got the same issue as well. So yeah, it's interesting times, to say the least.
Yeah, obviously we've got this rent control in California, and it made its way to Oregon, and there's discussion about it making up to the next state, which is where you are. So I see that trend starting to become more of a national trend. I would not be surprised if the people in the White House make that some sort of an agenda item in the future. I can see that happening, some sort of national rent control or rent stabilization coming, but it's just going to create more opportunities for the people that know how to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. I know that'll be interesting. Investors are looking at other states because they don't want to deal with
Oh,
the stabilization of rents and having rent control. So that's why they're investing
we
in
have
other
a lot of
states.
clients. We
Yeah.
have a lot of clients that sold here and they bought in Texas. Even broker friends of mine have sold buildings here in LA. I got an email from a friend of mine yesterday. He's a broker and he owned a small building in Long Beach and he sold that and he's buying a building in Austin, Texas. I mean, it seems like everyone is going to Austin right now, which just probably means prices are double what they were probably 6 months ago. But hey, a lot of these people are smarter than me and they're still doing it. So there must be something to it, Ernest.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you said that Austin, San Antonio, kind of that general metro area out there in Texas. I think it's just a super hot market right now out there.
Yeah, that's his boom or bust, it seems like. But a lot of people are comfortable that Austin, Texas is going to become like, I don't know, Silicon Valley or something. I don't know. We'll see. I just still think coastal California long term, you always do really well. But people are just worried about legislative risk, and that's understandable. But you could get rent control anywhere in the country now, especially with our federal government. I mean, they could put that through in a second. Who knows? We'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
exactly. I get, like you said, only time will tell, right?
Oh yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. So, Brent, really, you've encompassed a lot. You've gave us some really good tidbits of information, so really appreciate that. Just a couple more things here, real quickly. I wanted to find out, where can our listeners connect with you and find you?
I'm really easy to reach. They can email me. They can call me. Email address Sprenkle Apartments. That's SPRENKLE, followed by apartments with an S.com. I'm sorry, sprenkleapartments@gmail.com. And they can call me. I'm always available, except for right now. 310-621-8221. And that's the easiest way to reach me.
Awesome. That's great. And our last question. So basically, it's kind of an action for our listeners out there who want to get into commercial real estate, or those that are actually, in real estate that have been in the game for a while. What are some actionable advice that you've learned that would be important, for our folks to actually take as far as their next steps to achieve their goals?
Well, you saved the best question for the last, Ernest. So one of the reasons why I wrote this book, Billion Dollar Portfolio, is because I wanted to really see what separated the people that owned one or two buildings from the people that owned 100 or 1,000. And one of the common answers that I received in interviewing all of these clients was that at one point they had a lot of excuses for why they didn't want to buy. Market's too hot, prices are too high, they felt a recession was coming, but they found ways to keep purchasing buildings. They found ways to keep making deals happen. And I myself got fooled by my own knowledge. Clients of mine would say, it's not a good time to buy because of this election coming up. This is going on with the rents, or building too many apartments, or rental market's going to get flooded. Everyone always had reasons not to buy. So the biggest action item I can say is you have to quit making excuses. There's never a perfect time to buy. In 2012, a lot of people told me, this recession's not done yet. It could get worse again. Those people, you think they're regretting their decision now? Oh my God, of course. So the time to buy is always now. Yes, you have to change your business plan every year, but you always have to keep trying to buy. The people that are very successful are always buying buildings. Maybe they take 2-3 months out to see what happens, or 2-3 months off, that is, but they're always buying. So my actionable item is quit making excuses. When I first got into the business, I was like, I'm not going to buy unless I find a home run. You are never going to find a home run. Those don't exist. That's like a mythical creature in a fairy tale, the home run deal. The people that become billionaires are buying singles and doubles, and are doing that consistently with a business plan. And they keep doing it. They buy 10 deals, they sell one of them. They buy another 10, they sell one. And they never lose. Sure, they go through some downturns like everybody else, but they have a business model. They usually have cash and reserves, and they always come out richer than they went into it. So my action item, Ernest, is just quit making excuses and keep finding ways to buy deals.
Awesome. Great advice, and a nice way to sum up, the last question, and to also sum up your book as well. So folks, when you get an opportunity, make sure to pick up Brent's book, How to Create a Real Estate Empire, $1 Billion Portfolio. Brent, thank you so much. And folks, I hope you had a wonderful time listening to this podcast and were able to grab some tidbits of information here. And I hope it was very valuable, because I know it was for me as well. Thank you, guys. And until the next time. Thanks for listening to the Breakthrough Investor in Commercial Real Estate podcast. If you like what you heard and you found value in this episode, we would really appreciate if you would give us a rating and a review. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. For those of you that are interested in investing passively in these types of deals in solid cash flowing commercial real estate throughout Arizona and Texas, as well as Idaho and Colorado, then visit us at mvpequitygroup.com. Fill out the investor interest form. That's mvpequitygroup.com. If you close on a multifamily deal or any other type of commercial property in the past 12 months and you want to be on this podcast, then send us an email on our Contact Us page for details. Thanks.